Alright, hello everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and I'm doing a video about Krysrain today because I've been enjoying testing the deck coming up to the release of DZ1, so, I wanted to talk about the deck anyways, and then Zen made a Twitter thread asking people's opinions about Krysrain. So, in the hallmark of a true YouTuber, I'm going to blatantly steal this for content. I'm also going to steal some of Kay's talking points because I largely agree with what they're saying. Starting with, like, being a 3+1 attack deck is, like, not even the problem. So if you look at other comments made on the thread, people kind of talk about being a 3 attack deck being bad. And I disagree with that assertion. So, like, I think the game plan for Krysrain is pretty clear. You have Realm, the grade 1, that if your opponent guards with not a Sentinel, they have to call 3 or more cards with different grades. So the general idea is that Krysrain is going to get decently big off of her own ability. She's going to have a crit. And then, you can stack in this guard restrict on top of that to really just signal to your opponent PG this attack. And the idea is that you're going to grind your opponent out of PGs over the course of kind of a long game, and then you can drop the Divine skill where you have a big asshole with an extra crit, possibly more depending on your trigger luck, to like close out the game. And I think that's a really interesting gameplay dynamic. Like, it's pretty close to what a control deck would be in Magic. So a long, long time ago, like Matt talked about that, where the definition of a control deck is like, yeah, you're taking all these actions to kind of disrupt your opponent in service to like a win condition. And so I think Krysrain is very close to that, which is why I'm very interested in the deck. Like, not a lot of decks really play like this in Vanguard, where, you only have the one really big turn. A lot of decks these days, like, when they do their big play, they can just kind of keep doing it over and over and over again. For example, Youth Burk. You would think with the condition of needing to, like, build up the 3 names, that this would be something that you build to over the course of a longer game, but instead they just printed a bunch of cards that turbo you to the win condition, right? And the end result is that you're just doing it over and over and over again. So, like, I think Krysrain being a 3+1 deck that's hard locked to like once per game is very interesting in combination with Realm. I think this is a really cool card. The big major issue, like the really big one, is probably a lack of countercharging. So Krysrain does have to counterblast a decent amount. She has to do it for her own ability, but also, like, her major support card, Annis, for set 1, also needs to counterblast to use its ability. So you're probably using at least, like, those two, right? So Annis helps you build a board, and of course, you just need to countercharge, or counterblast for Krysrain. And then, a lot of, like, the powerful generic options for Lyrical also counterblast. So there's Melty, there's also Straya, which is something that I was trying to use when I was building Krysrain. So we're kind of ignoring the first one because you need to play in order for that. But the second ability is like when you attack a grade 3 or greater unit, if it was placed this turn, you can counterblast 1, draw a card, and it gets 10k. So this kind of does a lot of things. Obviously, like, more draw power is good. I think the overall goal for Krysrain is to play like the long game to try and like soften your opponent up for the divine skill. But again, counterblast, right? So you counterblast 1 for Krysrain, you might need to counterblast for Annis, and then, like, if you're also going to use Straya, that's like 3. If you play Melty in the early game, that's a counterblast, like, and you just don't really have a super reliable way to get it back. So something I've seen other people trying to do is they will play Ingrid, because that has the ability when it's placed other than from the hand, you can countercharge, so you can call Ingrid off of Annis, and that's like a way to countercharge. I also tried to play like LV, so that one has an on-hit countercharge, but the problem with that obviously is on-hit. So that's a bit telegraphed to your opponent. You can try to like work around that by giving her the plus 15k from Krysrain. Since you have this guard restrict, like, you just kind of force your opponent to like drop cards on Krysrain anyways, which is really cool. So like that's something, maybe. But again, like, the question is reliability. And then I don't remember the name right now, but there is another, like, lyrical grade 2 that can, like, countercharge. I think it was in set 1. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Uh-oh. I believe it was human. Let's see. Nope, not that. Nope. Nope. It had the ability that, like, if you played an order that turn, you can, like, put its booster to soul to, like, nope, to, like, countercharge. But, like, that requires a lot of things to go right. Not Willista. God, I cannot find this card now. No. That's not it. Nope. I will find this card. God damn it. Where is it? Here it is. So yeah, this card. So if it attacked while boosted, if you played an order, you can put this unit into the soul to countercharge 1. So that is like a somewhat reliable way to countercharge, but again, there's so many things that have to go right. Like, you have to play an order, it has to be boosted, and then of course that's also taking away from like other rear guards that you could be playing. So if you have this, if you had that on the board, then you might not have had like Annis, who's a 10k beater, or you might not have like Straya because you're trying to like make space for all of it. So like you just kind of end up in this issue where like even if you have ways of like countercharging, it gets in the way of other things you maybe wanted to do. And I think there's a order. No, that gives. I feel like there was also an order in Lyrical that could let you like Soul Blast or Energy Blast for like a counter charge. So I was thinking of like playing that alongside that other unit that I saw earlier, whose name I already forgot, Virginia. Or no, I think when I was building it, I just played that order that was like Energy Blast 2, give 3 things 5k. Like that solves a couple issues of like gaining power, and then that turns on Virginia to get the counter charge. And, you know, the deck can, like, kind of use Soul a little bit for Yuika. Like, I think Yuika is just a staple for Lyrical, especially because Krysrain is so generic. But, yeah. Generally, countercharge is an issue. Like, there are, like, some solutions that you can try, but they all require some sort of compromise. And then, the other thing that was pointed out by Kay and some other people in the thread is that the deck has an excess of energy. So one of Krysrain's ability is that you energy charge 3, plus the 3 you get naturally at the start of your ride phase. So you counterblast 3 for, or you energy blast 3 for Realm, and then you also have to energy blast for Annis, but that's just a net 0 at the end, and you're not always going to use Annis's ability too, right? Like, you might be in a position where you already have most of the cards you need, and so you don't have to call anything else. Especially if your opponent is playing a deck that doesn't have any kind of removal. So, like, you just kind of end up with an excess of energy. So, something that we could see in the future, and something that I hope Bushiroad does, is something that just, like, trades energy for countercharging, right? So that would preferably in the form of a grade 1, because I think like the higher grade front row is already kind of filled out. So like a back row unit that can energy blast to countercharge would probably be welcome for Krysrain. And then on the topic of like control decks, like I said before, Krysrain is kind of aiming to grind people out, and so something I would be very interested in seeing for Krysrain is like some sort of removal option for her. Set 2 did have a double R that was like bounce. You can Soul Blast, bounce something to your opponent's hand, and then they discard a card. But that just gives them like a ton of control to curate their own hand. And so I don't love that one. I would really like a more straightforward, just like retire something or spin it back to the deck. Like, you know, that's just something I want to see. And then I guess like the other thing about Krysrain is I feel like they're a little afraid of giving her units that like gain power just like normally. So Annis needs you to have like different names to gain her power, as does Franquette in set 2, where you need to have like the different. She has to either get the power from Krysrain, which will obviously be negated once you bounce it back to the hand with the divine skill, and then the extra 5k you need to have units with different names, right? So I think like the one thing that Krysrain has that gains power in just a normal way is the grade 3 that needs to counterblast to get the 15k. So, like, that's another one that kind of confuses me, where it seems like they're a little afraid of letting you gain power after the divine skill, even though that is your win con. Like, I wouldn't mind if something just, like, you call it with the divine skill, and then you can, like, give it extra power without having to, like, counterblast for it, you know? Because Krysrain, like, for set 1 will probably be, like, 38k with no triggers, and so you call a rear guard that's, like, 38k and a crit, which is fine, but it's also, like, pretty survivable even without a PG, right? Like, you really want to be pushing that, like, 40, maybe even 50k number, which you definitely need to find triggers to do, and my own personal experience with that has not been great over the weekend. But yeah, in general, I don't necessarily think Krysrain needs, like, extra attacks. I think, like, if Bushiroad were to, like, double down on giving her, like, a stronger grind game, giving her, like, resource gain and removal options, that would probably go a long way to, like, making the deck better. I think in terms of gaining good numbers, Franquette in set 2 already does a ton for it, so a big thing is giving you, like, an unpunishable early game, because you can, like, bounce back your front row in conjunction with Yuika. So being able to, like, drop your hand early, rush, kind of rack up the damage so that your opponent can't afford to take the divine skill, and so you can or can't afford to take Krysrain's crit normally, so then you can kind of leverage your, like, bigger rearguard columns with Franquette and Annis, and then hopefully the divine skill kind of gets in there. So I would really want to see, like, countercharging and removal for Krysrain. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video. I just kind of wanted to ramble a bit about the new deck that I'm pet decking. So yeah, hope this was interesting for y'all. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.